The sun had barely risen over Beverly Hills, casting its golden glow over the towering mansions. Inside one of them, Aaliyah Jack moved through her morning routine, completely unaware that this would be the last time she'd ever do so. She hummed softly as she poured her coffee, glancing at her phone. A few unread messages from her mother, a couple of work emails, nothing unusual. But then, footsteps. Lorenzo was awake. She turned and smiled at her husband, the man she had married 3 years ago. A powerful, mysterious figure who had given her a life of luxury beyond her wildest dreams. Yet, beneath the surface, she had begun to notice cracks. Whispers behind closed doors, hushed phone calls, strange tension whenever his son, Alex, was around. Aaliyah didn't know it yet, but today, she was about to uncover the one truth she was never meant to find out. And by the time the sun set, her life would be over. A truth too dangerous to know. Aaliyah had seen signs before, but she had always dismissed them, convincing herself that her husband's relationship with Alex was just, complicated. But when she walked in on them that day, there was no more denying it. What she saw shattered everything. It wasn't just an affair, it was something far worse. A scandal that, if exposed, would destroy Lorenzo's carefully crafted image and put his entire empire at risk. For a man like Lorenzo, whisper Rizzo, there was only one way to deal with a threat like this. And this is where things take a chilling turn. But before we get into what happened next, let me ask you this: if you uncovered a secret that could cost you everything, what would you do? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more gripping true crime stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because in this story, silence wasn't just golden, it was a matter of life and death. The truth was out there, but in Lorenzo's world, it wasn't one that could simply be shared. And so, as the hours ticked by, the carefully woven lies began to spin, sealing Aaliyah's fate. This wasn't just about a woman discovering an affair, this was about power, betrayal, and a mafia lord desperate to protect his legacy at any cost. As the investigation would later reveal, Aaliyah's life ended in a way that shocked not only the local community but the entire nation. Her husband, a feared figure on the FBI's watch list, would stop at nothing to keep his darkest secrets buried, even if it meant silencing the one person who knew too much. But the truth has a way of coming to light, and those involved would soon discover that even the most powerful criminals can't escape the consequences forever. Beverly Hills, home to the rich, the famous, and the elite. A place where money flows like water, and every street corner tells the story of luxury. Behind every gate, there's a mansion with secrets, some darker than others. In the heart of this opulent neighborhood stood the mansion of Lorenzo, whisper Rizzo, one of the most feared men in the criminal underworld. The home was the epitome of wealth, grand columns, marble floors, and expensive art lining every wall. It was a fortress of solitude, a place where few outsiders were ever allowed to glimpse. From the outside, the mansion appeared perfect, a dream home for a power couple. But behind its tall gates and pristine exterior, there were shadows lurking. A family with secrets that could destroy everything they had built. Aaliyah Jack had entered this world 3 years ago, after marrying Lorenzo, a man known for his control and ruthlessness. She was young, ambitious, and had dreams of making her mark in the world of interior design. But when she entered Lorenzo's life, she had no idea just how much her world would change. Lorenzo, a man with a history of manipulation and power, had more than just business dealings keeping him busy. And his son, Alex Rizzo, was about to become the center of a deadly storm. Aaliyah Jack's life before marrying Lorenzo had been filled with ambition and hard work. A talented interior designer with a keen eye for detail, she had earned a reputation in Beverly Hills for transforming luxury homes into breathtaking masterpieces. But when she met Lorenzo, everything shifted. At 29 years old, she was drawn to his power and the promise of a life she had only dreamed of. Lorenzo, a 58-year-old mafia lord, was everything she wasn't: commanding, enigmatic, and, as she quickly learned, dangerous. Though their marriage seemed like a fairy tale from the outside, it didn't take long for Aaliyah to realize there were darker elements lurking beneath the surface. Lorenzo had a reputation in the criminal world, known for his ruthless nature and the fact that he was a major player in the underground mafia scene. His nickname, Whisper, came from the way he controlled his empire with cold precision. No one dared cross him. At first, Aaliyah felt invincible in her new world of wealth and status, but as time passed, she started noticing signs of something deeper, an ever-present tension between her husband and his son, Alex. The young man was in his early 20s, but his presence in their home felt strangely off. Aaliyah couldn't place it, but there was an unspoken connection between the two that set her on edge. In the months leading up to that fateful day, Aaliyah couldn't ignore the mounting tension in her marriage. The small, almost imperceptible signs had been building for a while: Lorenzo's secretive late-night phone calls, the mysterious trips he took without her, and the growing distance between them. But it wasn't just Lorenzo's behavior that had Aaliyah on edge. It was Alex. The 24-year-old presence was becoming more unnerving with each passing day. The way he would linger around the mansion, the strange glances exchanged between him and his father, there was something off about their relationship. Aaliyah tried to dismiss it as nothing more than paranoia. After all, she had a beautiful life, a flourishing career, and a husband who provided everything she could ever want. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. On the morning of September 16, 2023, everything changed. It began like any other day. Aaliyah had a client meeting scheduled, and Lorenzo was in his office, reviewing paperwork. But as she walked past the study, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. The door to Lorenzo's office was slightly ajar, and through the crack, she could see him, standing there with Alex, too close for comfort. The tension in the room was thick, and Aaliyah's heart began to race. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew one thing: she had just stumbled upon a secret that would cost her everything. Days passed, and Aaliyah's mother, Jacqueline, began to grow more and more concerned. Her daughter had always been a responsible woman, one who kept in close contact, but now there was an eerie silence. Texts and calls went unanswered, and Aaliyah was always mysteriously unavailable when her mother tried to reach her. Jacqueline knew something was wrong. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the lack of communication was too odd to ignore. Aaliyah had never been the type to go days without checking in, especially when it came to her mother. Jacqueline had tried to get in touch with Lorenzo, but each time he gave the same vague answers: Aaliyah was busy with work, or she was taking a much-needed vacation. But Jacqueline wasn't convinced. She hadn't raised her daughter to be the type to disappear without a word, especially not with all the grand plans they had made together for the future. Finally, Jacqueline made the decision to go to the mansion. She showed up unannounced, not giving Lorenzo or anyone else a chance to prepare for her arrival. As she entered the gates and made her way up the long driveway, she could sense that something wasn't right. The mansion, usually a picture of tranquility, seemed off, quiet and empty. No staff were around, and the heavy front door creaked as she pushed it open. "Aaliyah?" Jacqueline called out, her voice laced with concern. But there was no answer. Only the sound of her own footsteps echoing through the empty house. Jacqueline's heart raced as she ventured deeper into the mansion. The once lavish home now felt cold and deserted, the silence hanging heavily in the air. She called out again, but the only response was the distant hum of the air conditioning. The absence of Aaliyah's voice was unnerving, like the very essence of her daughter had vanished from this place. She approached the grand staircase, her eyes scanning the walls for any signs of life. As she reached the top, she saw Lorenzo standing in the hallway outside his office, his face a mask of composure. He had clearly been expecting her, but there was something in his eyes. Something calculating, a hidden tension that sent a chill down Jacqueline's spine. "Lorenzo," Jacqueline said firmly, trying to hide the worry in her voice. "Where is my daughter?" Lorenzo's smile was tight, forced. He stepped forward, blocking her path. "Aaliyah has gone on a short vacation," he explained, his voice smooth and reassuring, as though nothing were amiss. She needed time away. I've told you, Jacqueline. Don't worry. But Jacqueline wasn't convinced. She had raised Aaliyah, and she knew her daughter better than anyone. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. I haven't heard from her in days, Jacqueline pressed, her voice now laced with anxiety. She would never just leave without telling me. You're hiding something. Lorenzo's eyes hardened, and for a split second, his calm facade slipped. Jacqueline caught a glimpse of something darker behind his steely gaze. It was fleeting, but it was enough to make her feel the hairs on the back of her neck rise. Jacqueline's suspicion only grew stronger as she stood face to face with Lorenzo. His unshakable calm was starting to feel more like a mask, hiding something far more dangerous. She tried to maintain control, but her voice betrayed her growing unease. Lorenzo, Jacqueline began, her tone more forceful, I want to see her. Now. Lorenzo hesitated for a brief moment before stepping aside. I told you, Jacqueline, Aaliyah is fine. She's just, not here right now. Despite his attempt to brush her off, Jacqueline wasn't backing down. She knew her daughter well enough to know that this was not normal. The lies, the evasion, it all pointed to something far darker than a simple vacation. She walked past him, her mind racing with every step she took. As she moved deeper into the mansion, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in, pressing in on her. When she reached Aaliyah's room, Jacqueline's breath caught in her throat. The room was pristine, untouched. There was no sign of her daughter's presence at all. Her thoughts swirled as she realized the grim possibility, Aaliyah was not just on a trip. She was gone, and Lorenzo had something to do with it. Before she could confront him again, Lorenzo's voice echoed through the hallway, calm yet commanding, Jacqueline, I'm telling you. It's best if you don't ask any more questions. You won't like the answers. A chill ran down Jacqueline's spine. She was no longer just a concerned mother, she was a woman who had unknowingly walked into the heart of something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. It wasn't long before Jacqueline's suspicions became impossible to ignore. She couldn't let her daughter's sudden disappearance slide. Despite Lorenzo's assurances, something was clearly wrong. Jacqueline went to the police, recounting the last few days, her growing fears, and the strange circumstances surrounding Aaliyah's disappearance. The investigation into Aaliyah's sudden vanishing took an unexpected turn when local authorities discovered that there were no records of her taking any flights or leaving town. The mansion itself offered few clues, no signs of a struggle, no indication of foul play. But Jacqueline's gut told her something was amiss. Lorenzo continued his charade, telling everyone that Aaliyah had gone away to relax, perhaps visiting friends. But his story didn't add up. When detectives began to question him further, his demeanor shifted from calm to defensive. Each question felt like a trap to him, and the walls of his perfect world began to crack. Despite Lorenzo's best efforts to remain composed, the investigators dug deeper. And it was through an unexpected source, a man working under Lorenzo, who finally gave them the breakthrough they needed. Lorenzo Rizzo had spent decades ensuring loyalty through fear and wealth. His men knew that betraying him meant signing their own death warrants. But in the end, it wasn't an enemy that sealed his fate, it was someone from within his own circle. One of his trusted associates, a man named Victor DeLuca, had recently been arrested on unrelated drug charges. Facing a long prison sentence, Victor saw an opportunity. If he gave the FBI something bigger, he might be able to walk free. And there was nothing bigger than Lorenzo Rizzo. Victor confessed everything. He told authorities about the night Aaliyah confronted Lorenzo. She had been furious, disgusted, and most of all, terrified of what this revelation meant. She threatened to leave, to expose him, and that was when Lorenzo made his decision. According to Victor's testimony, Lorenzo ordered his men to take care of Aaliyah before she could ruin him. They followed her, intercepted her, and ensured she was never seen again. Her body was disposed of in a manner so calculated that it took months before law enforcement could piece together the truth. Victor's testimony was damning. It not only implicated Lorenzo in Aaliyah's murder but also exposed his illicit empire in ways that left him vulnerable. Suddenly, the fearsome Mafia Lord was no longer untouchable. The FBI moved quickly. With Victor's cooperation, they built an airtight case. Wiretaps, bank records, and insider accounts painted a damning picture of a man who had ruled through terror but had finally run out of places to hide. Lorenzo Rizzo, a man who had once controlled everything, was now on borrowed time. With Victor DeLuca's testimony, the FBI had everything they needed to bring down Lorenzo Rizzo. His empire, built on fear and ruthless control, was now collapsing around him. Agents moved swiftly, securing warrants for his arrest, as well as for key members of his inner circle. But Lorenzo wasn't going to go down without a fight. Inside his Beverly Hills mansion, he paced back and forth, barking orders to his remaining loyal men. He knew the FBI was coming, it wasn't a matter of if, but when. He had seen others in his position crumble under federal pressure, but he had always believed himself to be untouchable. Not anymore. His men were divided. Some were willing to stand with him until the end, but others had already begun to disappear, sensing the inevitable. Lorenzo had always ruled through power, but when power fades, so does loyalty. As the sun set, unmarked FBI vehicles took position around his estate. Snipers were stationed on nearby rooftops, and tactical teams prepared for the takedown. Lorenzo's world was about to implode, and this time, there was no escape. Then came the moment he had been dreading, the loudspeaker announcement that shattered the silence. Lorenzo Rizzo, this is the FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest. Come out with your hands up. Lorenzo exhaled slowly, gripping the edges of his desk. He had two options, surrender and face the consequences, or go out on his own terms. For the first time in his life, he realized he was no longer in control. The walls were closing in, and Lorenzo Rizzo knew it. The FBI was outside, their voices echoing through loudspeakers, demanding his surrender. The once feared Mafia Lord stood in his office, gripping the edges of his desk, his mind racing through every possible escape route. But deep down, he knew, this was the end. His men, the ones who had sworn loyalty to him, were nowhere to be found. Some had already fled. Others had flipped, trading their silence for reduced sentences. The empire he had built through blood and intimidation was crumbling. Lorenzo opened a drawer and pulled out a handgun, weighing it in his palm. Surrender meant humiliation, a life sentence, a slow death behind bars. But there was another option. He took a deep breath, then moved toward the door. As he stepped into the grand hallway, shadows flickered across the walls from the flashing police lights outside. He glanced at the large windows, snipers positioned on rooftops, their scopes locked onto the mansion. With each step, memories of his past flashed before him. The power, the control, the fear he had instilled in others. And now, the same fear was gripping him. He reached the front door. The voices outside grew louder. Lorenzo Rizzo, come out now. Lorenzo closed his eyes for a moment, gripping the gun tighter. This wasn't how he had envisioned his final days. But no one escapes forever. The door handle turned. The moment of truth had arrived. The heavy front doors of the mansion creaked open, revealing Lorenzo Rizzo standing in the doorway. The floodlights from the FBI vehicles washed over him, casting sharp shadows across his face. His expression was unreadable, part defiance, part resignation. He held his hands at his sides, the weight of the gun still pressing against his palm. Drop the weapon, Lorenzo, an agent commanded through a megaphone. The mansion's once pristine courtyard was now a battlefield of flashing lights and trained snipers. Helicopter blades sliced through the night air, their searchlights locked onto him. For a brief moment, Lorenzo considered his options. He could end it here, one last act of control over his own fate. Or he could live long enough to see everything he built dismantled. His fingers flexed around the grip of the gun. "Lorenzo, this is your last chance. Drop it." Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, he lifted his hands, letting the gun slip from his grasp. It clattered against the marble steps. FBI agents swarmed in. Within seconds, he was forced to the ground, his face pressed against the cold stone as handcuffs clicked tightly around his wrists. As they pulled him to his feet, he locked eyes with Jacqueline, standing in the crowd behind the barricades. Her face was a mix of grief and satisfaction. She had lost her daughter, but she had taken down the man responsible. For the first time in his life, Lorenzo Rizzo had no power. No men to protect him. No deals to make. Just silence and the crushing reality that his reign was finally over. As he was shoved into the waiting FBI vehicle, one thing was clear: his legacy would not be one of power, but of disgrace. Lorenzo Rizzo's arrest sent shockwaves through both the criminal underworld and the public. News outlets ran headlines exposing his double life, not just as a ruthless mafia lord, but as a man who had hidden an unthinkable secret. His once loyal allies distanced themselves, desperate to avoid the fallout. The trial was one of the most high-profile cases in recent history. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence: Victor DeLuca's testimony, forensic analysis from the mansion, financial records linking Lorenzo to countless criminal enterprises, and, most damning of all, proof of his involvement in Aaliyah's murder. Jacqueline sat in the front row every day, her presence a reminder of the life that had been stolen. She listened as the courtroom dissected her daughter's final moments, as investigators detailed the steps Lorenzo took to cover up the crime. Each word felt like a knife, but she refused to look away. When the verdict finally came, it was swift and brutal. His power, wealth, and influence meant nothing now. The man who once controlled an empire was reduced to an inmate, stripped of everything he had built. But justice didn't end with Lorenzo. His son and former lover, Alex Rizzo, faced his own legal troubles, as investigators uncovered his involvement in the family's criminal operations. While he didn't face the same fate as his father, his name was forever tainted. As Lorenzo was led away in handcuffs for the final time, Jacqueline allowed herself to exhale. She had fought for her daughter, and though nothing could bring Aaliyah back, she had ensured that the man responsible would never walk free again. In the aftermath of Lorenzo Rizzo's conviction, the world finally learned who Aaliyah Jack truly was, not just a victim, but a woman who had unknowingly stood against a dangerous empire. Her name became a symbol of resilience, a reminder of the silent battles so many fight behind closed doors. Jacqueline refused to let her daughter's story fade into another tragic statistic. She established the Aaliyah Jack Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to supporting victims of domestic abuse, coercion, and criminal intimidation. The foundation worked closely with law enforcement and advocacy groups, ensuring that other women who found themselves trapped in dangerous relationships had the resources to escape before it was too late. Public reaction was overwhelming. People across the country rallied behind the foundation, donating to its cause and sharing Aaliyah's story as a warning. The mansion where she had spent her final years, once a symbol of wealth and power, was left abandoned, a haunting reminder of the darkness that had lurked behind its pristine walls. As for Lorenzo, he spent his remaining days behind bars, stripped of his influence and forgotten by those who once feared him. Without his wealth and control, he was just another prisoner, a shadow of the man he once was. Alex Rizzo disappeared from the public eye, unable to escape the shame of his father's crimes. His attempt to build a life beyond his past was difficult. The world would never forget the role he played in the downfall of the Rizzo Empire. And Jacqueline? She found a bittersweet peace. She had lost her daughter, but she had fought for her. And in doing so, she ensured that Aaliyah's voice would echo far beyond the walls of that Beverly Hills mansion. Aaliyah's story is one of betrayal, power, and a fight for the truth, but sadly, it cost her everything. Cases like this remind us how dark secrets can destroy lives. What do you think should have happened to Lorenzo? Was justice truly served? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story left you shocked, imagine how many others are still hidden, waiting to be uncovered. By liking this video and subscribing, you're helping bring more of these cases to light. So, if you want more gripping true crime stories that expose the truth, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Most importantly, if you believe Aaliyah's story deserves to be heard, share this video. Someone out there needs to see it. You could be the reason they find the strength to walk away from a dangerous situation before it's too late.